Hey everyone. Things can feel a little crazy right now, especially with the economy.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's trying to figure out this puzzle, but the pieces keep changing. And that's why we're diving into this fascinating conversation between Patrick Bet-David and Tom Bilyeu.
Yeah,
They had so many interesting points, and we're going to pull out the stuff that you can really use.
exactly. And Bet David, he's got such a sharp mind when it comes to market trends. So let's get right into it.
Okay, so one of the first things that Bet David brings up is how American political cycles can make it like impossible to plan anything long term with the economy.
Uh-huh.
And he uses this analogy of like constantly changing the blueprints while building a house.
Right. That is such a good way to think about it. Imagine the frustration of like ripping down walls and moving windows every couple of years.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's kind of what it feels like with our economic policy sometimes,
Yeah.
right? And so I think Bet David's point is that this constant back and forth between parties, it makes it just really tough to keep any kind of consistent economic vision.
And while that constant change can be kind of annoying, it does stop things from going too far in one direction.
Right.
But you have to wonder, does it also prevent us from making any real progress on those, you know, big long-term problems?
Yeah, it's a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
Like, we avoid going to extremes, but maybe we lose the ability to really dig in and solve those really complex problems that need attention over decades, not just, until the next election.
Yeah.
Makes you think, like, how does this affect industries that really rely on long-term planning? Like infrastructure,
Oh gosh, yeah.
energy, even healthcare.
That's a great point. How does this whole political roller coaster thing affect your industry? Or the goals you're working towards? Something to consider.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out to a global scale, because Bet David also talks about this massive power shift that's happening, and he calls it the semiconductor war with the rise of India.
Oh, yeah. And this is where it gets really interesting. We're seeing this huge shift in manufacturing away from China. And India is like right there ready to step in. Yeah, think about it. iPhones are already being made in India.
Wow, I didn't realize it was happening that quickly.
Right.
So is India just like copying China's model, or are they changing things up?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like India is learning from China's mistakes, especially with their workforce,
Okay.
because China, their infamous one-child policy that has created a shrinking and aging workforce, right?
Oh, yeah.
But India has this massive young population and a huge pool of engineering talent.
So they're not just taking over manufacturing, they're also becoming a real player in the tech world, too.
Exactly.
And from what you're saying, it sounds like Taiwan is at the center of all this.
Taiwan is crucial because they basically control the most advanced semiconductor chips in the world.
Okay.
And these tiny little chips are literally the brains behind all of our technology. So smartphones to cars to the servers that, run the internet. And China really, really wants to control that.
Which makes sense, because whoever controls the semiconductor industry, they control a huge chunk of the global economy.
Exactly.
Look at all the technological innovation.
It's like controlling the oil of the digital age.
Oh, wow.
So this semiconductor war, this has huge implications for everyone. It could impact everything from how much your next phone upgrade costs
Yeah.
to, how fast we see new technology across different industries.
It's crazy to think how these tiny chips have become like the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
Speaking of potential shakeups, Bet David doesn't shy away from some of the not-so-good economic signs on the horizon. He even suggests that a depression might be coming, and he uses Michael Burry's decision to short the S&P 500 as a major warning.
It's important to remember that, predicting the economy is really tricky.
Oh, yeah.
But when someone like Burry, the guy who called the 2008 housing crisis, when he makes a move like that,
People notice.
people pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a sign that some very smart people are betting on a downturn.
It definitely gets your attention. And Bet David links this possible downturn to the growing gap between the rich and the poor. And he says technology, like AI, is just going to speed that up even more. And that's a scary thought.
Hmm.
So what are some of the possible scenarios we could be looking at?
It's not just about robots taking jobs, although that is definitely part of it. AI is changing things in ways we're only beginning to understand.
Yeah.
Think about AI-driven investment strategies that could create even more wealth for those who are already wealthy.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Or AI automating those highly skilled jobs that we always thought were safe.
So it's not just like blue-collar workers anymore.
Exactly. It's impacting everyone.
So how do we deal with this? It feels like we need to make ourselves more valuable in this new economy, but like, what does that even mean?
That's where it gets interesting, and it connects to what Tom Bilyeu calls positive paranoia.
I love that idea. It's
Yeah.
like being optimistic about the future, but also having a bit of what if thinking.
Right.
Like, what if things don't go to plan?
Exactly.
What's my backup plan?
It's not about living in fear, but being prepared and adaptable.
Right.
So in this context, having some cash reserves, diversifying your investments, and focusing on building real expertise in areas that you genuinely care about,
Right.
those are smart moves to make sure you're flexible and can handle whatever comes your way.
That makes sense. Instead of trying to predict the future perfectly, you're creating options for yourself.
Yeah.
So no matter what happens, you've got skills and resources to use.
Exactly.
So I have to ask, what unique knowledge or expertise do you have that you could use in a changing economy? What are your strengths?
It's the key question for everyone, right?
Mhm.
It's not about panicking. It's about looking at what you already have, both like the actual stuff you own and the things you're good at, and then figuring out how to make them work for you in the years ahead.
Okay, so Bet David also talks about the role of capitalism itself in all of this. And he's actually pretty optimistic. He believes capitalism has like a built-in way of correcting itself. What does he mean by that?
Well, he argues that the core of capitalism, that desire for profit, actually prevents those in power from making decisions that would ultimately hurt the system as a whole.
Yeah.
He believes they're driven to act in ways that benefit everyone, even if it means sacrificing something in the short term.
So he's saying they won't, saw off the branch they're sitting on, even if it seems like a good idea at the time.
Yeah, that's the idea.
And he sees social media playing a huge role in this.
Absolutely.
He believes it's this powerful force for calling out bad behavior and holding institutions accountable.
And we've seen that, right?
Yeah.
Social media can really amplify voices and shine a light on issues that might have been ignored in the past.
He even mentioned the Supreme Court talking about limiting social media companies' power to censor content.
Yeah.
It's like the fight for free speech is happening online now.
It's really fascinating. This increased transparency has the potential for real positive change.
Yeah.
But it comes with risks, too. How do we make sure social media is being used for truth and accountability and not for spreading lies and dividing people?
It's definitely a double-edged sword. It makes you think about what your own role is in this whole digital world.
Definitely.
How do you see social media shaping how we interact with the world, the way we form opinions and hold those in power accountable? It's a question we should all be thinking about.
For sure.
And,
Yeah.
I think that's a great place to pause for now.
Yeah, good place to take a break.
Catch our breath, and we'll be right back with more from this deep dive into Patrick Bet-David's insights.
Sounds good. This whole conversation about social media and its power,
Yeah.
it makes me think about something Bet David said about incentive programs.
Oh, yeah. He was saying how important it is to understand incentives,
Yeah,
to really get how any system works, like business, politics, even relationships.
exactly. It's like figuring out what makes people tick.
Yeah.
What motivates them to do what they do.
And he gave that great example from his own experience. Trying to hire salespeople, he said over time he realized it wasn't always like the flashy, charismatic types who were the best.
That's surprising, right?
Yeah, you'd think those would be the people closing all the deals.
You would think so.
Yeah.
But he found that the salespeople who consistently did well were the ones who had more stability in their lives, like people with families, mortgages, real responsibility.
So it wasn't just about their personality, it was about what they had to lose.
Exactly. Bet David realized that these individuals had a much stronger incentive to work hard and make good decisions because they had more at stake if things went wrong. Their personal lives were directly tied to their professional success.
It's fascinating how that works. It makes you realize how important it is to understand what drives people.
Absolutely. And this ties back to Bet David's optimism
Yeah.
because he sees all these forces at play, capitalism's tendency to self-correct, social media's power to hold people accountable, and this basic truth about human motivation. And he thinks these things can actually work together to create a more positive future.
It's a hopeful way to look at things, but are there any flaws in that thinking? Is he maybe being a little too idealistic about capitalism's ability to fix itself, especially with all the problems we're facing?
That's a really good question, and it's definitely something people debate. Some would say that relying on the invisible hand of the market to solve things like inequality or climate change is a bit naive.
Yeah.
They'd argue we need more intervention, stronger regulations, a bigger focus on social responsibility, not just profits.
I can see that point. But I think what's important about Bet David's perspective is that he emphasizes individual action.
Right.
He's not saying we should just sit back and wait for the system to magically fix everything.
He's saying get involved, be informed, engage in conversations, and hold those in power accountable.
So it's not just about voting, although that's important.
Right.
It's about being active on a deeper level.
Exactly. He encourages people to get involved at every level.
Right.
You know, run for local office, support policies you believe in, even just having thoughtful conversations with friends and family about these issues.
It's recognizing that we all have a sphere of influence, big or small,
Yeah.
and we can use our voices to make a difference.
Now, one thing that really stuck with me was this analogy Bet David used about poker. He said the establishment, those in power, they basically revealed their cards.
Oh, yeah, that was such a powerful image. What did he mean by that?
We was talking about how events like the COVID-19 pandemic and the way governments and institutions responded, they exposed certain agendas and power dynamics that were maybe hidden before.
Oh, I see. So we've kind of gotten a peek behind the curtain.
Right.
We understand a bit better how things work, who's really in control, and what their priorities are.
Exactly. And his point is that now that we've seen these cards, we have a choice to make.
Okay.
We can either ignore them and let those agendas continue, or we can use this knowledge to make better decisions and push for change.
It puts the responsibility on us, the citizens, to be aware and engaged.
Yeah, we can't just pretend we didn't see what we saw.
And this brings us back to that idea of positive paranoia.
It does.
Being aware of the risks, but not letting that fear stop us from acting.
Right. It's about channeling that awareness into action, becoming more discerning, more engaged, and ultimately more empowered to create the future we want.
So I'll bet David is optimistic about positive change. He also acknowledges that things could go in a bad direction.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't sugarcoat things.
What were some of the downsides he talked about?
Well, he warned that if we don't learn from past mistakes, if we become complacent or disengaged, we risk repeating them and allowing those who want to grab more power to succeed.
It's a good reminder that the future isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the choices we make both individually and as a society.
Absolutely.
It's on us to build the world we want to live in.
And that's why these kinds of conversations are so important.
Yeah.
They push us to think critically, question our assumptions, and consider different viewpoints.
They encourage us to be active participants in shaping our own destinies, not just passive observers on the sidelines.
And that's really the whole point of this deep dive, to give you the tools and insights you need to navigate this complex world and make informed choices about your own future.
That idea of incentive programs, it really stuck with me. It's like this powerful tool for creating positive change,
Yeah.
but people don't really think about it enough.
It is fascinating, and it got me thinking, what if we actually use this idea to tackle some of those big challenges we've been talking about? What kind of cool incentive programs could we come up with?
Okay, I love that. Let's brainstorm. So we talked about that potential wealth gap getting bigger, right? What if businesses got like tax breaks or something for investing and training their employees, especially in those new tech areas like AI?
It's a great idea. You could tie it to the number of employees they retrain. Give them a reason to help their workers stay ahead of the curve and adapt to those changing jobs.
Right. It helps people stay relevant and valuable, which is good for everyone. And thinking about those supply chain issues, we talked about what if governments gave incentives for bringing manufacturing back home, especially for things like those semiconductor chips?
That's a smart move.
Hmm.
You can incentivize companies to relocate, invest in research, or build new factories right here at home. It would make us less reliant on other countries, create more jobs here, and that could really boost the economy.
It's like we're setting ourselves up for a stronger future, not just reacting to crises, but creating the world we want to live in.
Exactly. And these were just a couple of ideas. There are tons of possibilities when you start thinking about how incentives can change behavior and create positive outcomes. What other ideas come to mind for you?
Well, we talked about social responsibility, right?
Yeah.
What if companies got rewards for being more sustainable or for really committing to diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
It could be tax benefits for hitting environmental targets or grants for groups doing social good work. It's about making it financially worthwhile for companies to do the right thing.
It's like making it a win-win. Doing good is good for business, too.
And this all goes back to Bet David's message of taking action. We don't have to just sit around and watch these problems happen.
Yeah.
We can use our knowledge to support policies that create change and to get behind businesses that share our values.
I'm feeling really inspired by this conversation. It reminds me that we have the power to shape the future,
Me too.
even if it starts with small choices.
That's the cool thing about these deep dives. It's not just about learning stuff. It's about coming up with new ideas, challenging what we think we know, and empowering you, the listener, to make a difference.
So as always, we want to leave you with something to think about. Bet David talked about incentive programs, and we've just scratched the surface here. What other creative programs can you think of that could help us tackle today's problems?
Yeah, what positive changes could we create if we were really smart about how we structure incentives? It's a question worth exploring.
Absolutely. Keep diving deep, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you then.